Everyone, thank you for coming to watch. So I've got you guys an update on some pretty active weather patterns that are going to start coming into play as we get later and later into November, and then eventually as we get into December. I think we're going to start to see some more and more big snowstorms and big winter storms that are going to be stretching across the Central and Eastern U.S. So I'm going to be talking about the potential for that in this update, and also our current El Nino status, just taking a look and checking back at where we are with our El Nino, because today's update is going to be kind of focusing a little bit more on the far future, reaching more and more into winter, because we are getting just closer. I feel like every day we get closer and closer to winter. So starting out here, looking at your current radar, not much going on. We got a storm system that's moving into the northwestern U.S., brings some pretty heavy rainfall through the Seattle area, pretty much just along portions of western Washington and Oregon State, that we see some snowfall up here in the mountains and those upper elevations. All right, and so we see in the south we got a huge storm system on our hands. A bunch of Gulf moisture is really pumping right into the system. We can see just tons and tons of Gulf moisture pumping right in the front of this, and that's what's really powering all these showers and thunderstorms. So if you looked at the water vapor loop, you would see very, very dense green colors, signifying some very, very saturated air in the atmosphere. And then this storm will most likely continue moving on its northeast trajectory, and then really it'll fizzle out slowly but surely as we get into tonight. But watch out for some pop up and maybe even some steady showers and rainfall as the storm moves over the Appalachian Mountains. We get into West Virginia, the Carolinas. You could definitely see a wet start to your weekend as we get into Friday, because it's a 3-day weekend. But anyways, yeah, I apologize for not uploading in a while. I had a pretty busy stretch here, so I couldn't really find the time to get any updates in, and also it was a very, very kind of I don't know what you would call it, but just a boring weather pattern that we had. We had a ridge that just all of a sudden it flattened out across the southern U.S., so we were just hot and we were dry in the south, but now things are going to be changing. So I'm here with you guys again, giving you guys an update on what's going to be happening. So taking a look at our current alerts, really nothing to make mention of, although we do have a few high wind watches out here in Montana. It's been very, very windy lately. Let's just check in here and see how windy exactly we're talking. Okay. Um. All right. So we can see we have a high wind watch out for Saturday. Okay, and then this is going to be out for Veterans Day. We could see Cut Bank, Fort Benton, Great Falls, Lewiston, uh, Conrad, Stanford. All right, and just a lot of these areas, Harlem, Hooray. You guys are all in that high wind watch. You can see we're most likely going to be gusting to definitely 40s, but up here you can see if we get into especially northwestern Montana, look at this. We're expecting 50 to 60 miles per hour gusts with isolated gusts around 65. That's certainly enough to uproot trees here. We could see St. Mary, Cut Bank really gusting to 50, but look at Cut Bank, 58 miles an hour. That's very strong winds. This is the peak gust forecast in Augusta, Montana. We see 59 miles per hour, so a very gusty day tomorrow. We're going to see trees down. You can see beware of crosswinds, especially in high-profile vehicles. So there's a blowover risk. So, I mean, you want to make sure that you're driving with caution especially when you're driving next to 18-wheelers. Okay, those really big trucks, because those trailers, the wind just it pushes right into those trailers. That really creates a big hazard for it to fall over. And if that falls on your car, then you know how bad that is, and that's a whole different story. So just a pretty hazardous day and weekend coming up for you guys in Montana. All right, out here for the storm in the northwest, not much. Right now we have a winter storm watch though going out for portions of a few counties in northern Washington State, and then the rest of the country is quiet other than that. All right, and so we move on to our current temperatures here. So taking a look at let's take this to where we were now. This was our daytime high temperatures. All right. So yeah, you can see that ridge. Really, you can see it used to be flattened out. Okay, but that cold air is starting to move down a little bit farther south, causing this ridge to kind of fold over to the eastern U.S. And now we see the southeast receiving a warm front, stretching a little bit into the mid-Atlantic, southern New England. We've been a little bit warmer than average out here, but mainly in the southeast is where we're seeing that warmer air. You can see we're in the 70s and 80s, especially along the Gulf Coast. A very nice day, other than the fact that we are seeing some rainfall with this. But if you eliminated the Gulf moisture, you'd be dealing with some sunshine most likely and some very nice temperatures. But north of that, we're getting into the 50s. We're a little bit cooler. Then we get into the 40s here. We see a few pockets of cold air because we do have an oncoming cold front. It's weak, but it's definitely moving its way down south. All right, that's going to bring down temperatures pretty far south. You can see really getting into New Mexico is where this the core of this cold front really ends here. But you can see out here into southeastern Canada, we get into the northeast. We have another cold blast coming down. All right, we're gonna see temperatures really get down, especially out here in Maine. Look at northern Maine, 30 degrees. I mean it. Let me tell you guys, we just had a pretty quick winter storm here, and it was actually snowing for a lot of people up here, upstate. Uh, and we saw a pretty nasty wintry mix. So it's definitely this is going to be pretty consistent as we get closer and closer into winter. All right, but this is tonight to the middle of this is pretty much the middle of night tonight. Tomorrow we see very cold, intense, deep cold. Pockets of cold air moving into the western U.S. Still dealing with warmer temperatures out in the east. All right, but you can still see definitely right here. Look at this cold front advancing. All right, it starts out here, and then it continues to advance farther south. And then this warm front, well, it kind of gets just pushed out to sea, and so that's going to allow that cold front to really take over. But man, look how cold it could get, really stretching all the way towards PA and then Northern Virginia. So a widespread, uh, widespread areas in the north could really be dealing with uh, some cold temperatures as we get into this weekend. So we go over to our current GFS model. This is the 18Z. I'm going to be showing you guys the 18Z and the 12Z because we've been seeing some pretty interesting scenarios on what could happen as we get later and later into November. So right now we are at November 9th, so we're definitely pretty good into fall. We're approaching winter, but we're not there yet. We're certainly not there yet. So, you know, at this point in time, this is where pretty much half the storm systems are snow and frozen precipitation, and half of them are just rainfall. That's what we're dealing with right now. Okay, and so usually this is usually one of the most active times in the year of just storm systems in general, and because you have literally every single threat possible. Okay, you have severe weather threat. It's the secondary severe weather season. We've been very, very quiet. I'm not sure why, because last year really started out with a bang, especially at this time last year. But we are very, very quiet in terms of severe weather. I don't know when the last time was that we had a slight or enhanced risk. I really can't remember. So that's very good. Okay, but we also do have a winter storm risk, meaning that we could get snow, we could get ice, we get sleet, freezing rain. Okay, all of this is possible with any storm system that moves through. And believe it or not, the tropics are also still, they're not a huge concern, but they're a very, very slight concern because the tropics, we never know exactly what is going to happen with the tropics. Okay, we've seen some pretty crazy scenarios, but even into November, we're in November 12th at this point in time, we still could have a few tropical waves looming in the Atlantic that have enough energy and enough warm air and moisture to get going. Okay, so this is why we call this one of the most active times of the year for weather. Okay, across the United States. So this is pretty lucky that we're in a what would be considered a pretty calm stretch of weather here in the next few days. We're getting into this is Tuesday of next week. Okay, and we see a lot of moisture getting flung into the the Gulf Coast. Okay, I've been watching this pretty closely, seeing what this does because I think this actually may have a chance of reaching tropical cyclone status. It really um depends on how warm these waters are because it's never been shown as a strong system, and it really depends on the ingredients that are left for it. It's very unlikely that this will get to a point that's strong enough to be a tropical cyclone, but I've just been watching it. It's nothing too crazy, but that's most likely just going to bring some relatively heavy rain to the southeast. Okay, at the same time, we see a pretty good trough starting to sweep down. We see a 997 millibar low pressure center right here. All right, excuse me. But behind it, it's pretty good, pretty strong cold front actually moving down. Okay, this looks like it could organize, and so we take this out a little bit farther, and right here, this is the hour where we really get a big system. Look at this huge trough, big dip in the jet stream. Man, we have a huge, I mean, look at this humongous ridge building over the western U.S. and then a plummet of that cold air. This is going to be a very intense Arctic blast if this happens. This is 186 hours out. So this is a week and 1 day out. This is Friday of next week. Okay, November 17th. The GFS has been hinting a pretty big winter storm bringing both rain and snow to some areas and a big cold blast following it. Okay, so we see what the latest 18Z shows. Well, it shows a pretty big storm. You can tell that this is a very strong storm. Look at all this precipitation moving over the Ohio River Valley into the northeastern U.S., the Appalachian Mountain region, a big area of the eastern U.S., really getting in on some rainfall on the backside where if you're a little farther north, you may be experiencing some snow with this. All right, but a 983 millibar low pressure right here, that's considered pretty strong, and this is really one of your typical November storm systems, and so this looks like it could be a banger. All right, and so we'll take a look at what the 12Z said about this earlier. Okay, but man, the 18Z is really dropping the hammer tonight. We're getting into 7 p.m. This would be Saturday. Okay, 7 p.m. the 17th. All right, and so we have a lot of backside snow here, a lot of cold air, really a deep plunge of cold air. That ridge still in the western U.S. that just continues to build, and I mean, we could switch to our temperature anomalies, which we'll actually look at in just a moment. But this is gonna be, I think this is gonna be a pretty active stretch, really, as we get into late next week. But we see where this takes us. We see very heavy rain moving over the eastern U.S. now into the northeastern U.S. and bang. Look at this massive storm system. This is a huge swath of rainfall. Man, I mean, this is crazy rainfall. The 18Z is showing a wild scenario, and we can't really say much about this other than the fact that the 18Z and 12Z GFS have been both agreeing that we could have a signal for this, and really all the past GFS models of the last 3 days really have been hinting that we could get some sort of a big storm system anywhere really from the 15th to the 19th of November, which would be next week. Okay, but what does the 18Z say? Well, it has a huge storm system, 977 millibars, which would, I mean, that is very strong. This is like showing a Winter Storm Elliott kind of scenario because this is, you know, behind all of this, you also have a huge Arctic blast coming down from Canada that's really pushing the storm out of the way. This is a incredibly strong trough that's sweeping over the eastern U.S. Okay, we see a lot of rainfall. I mean, look at this crazy amounts of rainfall moving over southern New England into the Outer Banks of North Carolina, just all the way up and down the coast here. A huge amount of rainfall. This would break headlines. This is going, if this actually turns out to be this strong, which we can't say anything about at the moment. If it actually turns out to be something like this, we could really be dealing with a pretty major storm system, and this is going to cause some problems. But notice how we see this again. I want to mention this. We have a huge ridge flattening out, and then bam, look at this. This is a very odd jet stream pattern here. Let me redo that. Let me redraw this. We see a huge ridge, and then bang, we get very deep in our cold front. Okay, and if you go back in time here, we'll take a look. We'll go back a little bit. Watch as this cold front, as it develops, it's also following the storm system. That shows you that this is a trough, and that this cold front swinging by to push that trough out of the way. That's very interesting to see how we go from here, where it's still developing, and it just follows. It follows the trough in the storm system, and bam, it's right here. And now the northeastern U.S. is in that trough. Okay, um, and I don't know what's going on here, but the GFS 18Z not only shows a huge ridge in the western U.S., a huge storm system in the east, a giant Arctic blast. On top of all this, a 958 millibar hurricane hitting Cuba. Okay, do not. I've said this so many times this year. Do not tell your family, your friends, and everyone you know that Mr. Storm on YouTube just said that a giant hurricane is about to hit Cuba and it looks like it might go for the United States. Okay? This is not what I'm saying. This is a crazy scenario that the 18Z GFS is saying, which, by the way, is known for showing crazy scenarios, um, especially November, a month, an active month like this. This is not uncommon to see, okay? So this is just a small signal of what could happen, okay? But this is definitely going to change. We're going to see big changes with this, but well, because we have a trough, a very strong trough, as a matter of fact, let's say the storm gets to a point near here. It's somewhere out here in the Caribbean, closer to the Gulf of Mexico. Well, it could get pulled out to the Atlantic by that trough, and that's pretty much what happens. But this is so far out. I mean, this is 264 hours out. There's really no point in showing this anymore. But that's just a wild scenario that the 18Z GFS is showing. But for the heck of it, we look at what could happen for the rest of November and a few other pop-up storms. But really, the storm of November will really looking like it will be this one if this happens. All right. Again, this is 204 hours out. A lot of time for this to change. A lot of time for this to completely change, really, and actually almost be nothing or just a very weak and minor storm system. We really just don't know. We just gotta continue watching the signals, continue watching what the GFS is saying, and we'll really just ride along with it. So comparing the 12Z to the 18Z, okay. What does the 12Z show? Well, it starts out pretty similar to the 18Z, showing a relatively calm pattern, but here we go. There's that same moisture and group of thunderstorms that's moving into the Gulf of Mexico, or the Gulf Coast, I should say, that fizzles out, okay? It shows another tropical cyclone, or it does show a hurricane going into Cuba. But remember what I said. Don't tell anybody that I just said that there's going to be a big hurricane. Okay, this is just another agreement here from the GFS on what could potentially happen in the far future. All right, but it shows another trough too, and another similar big cold front. And look at this. That ridge looks pretty much exactly the same to what the 18Z was showing. So it's pretty interesting to see how the 18Z and the 12Z are showing. I wouldn't say the exact same thing, obviously, but pretty close to similar things. And we see a very strong and big storm system, really, that gets going here across the eastern U.S. We see that same stripe of very intense rainfall moving over the east coast, and then on the backside you get that deep Arctic blast and some very heavy snow into these northern states, upstate regions of New York, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and all that jazz. But I mean, look at this. This trough does pick up the hurricane, but man, I mean, this is insane how much rain the GFS is showing, and I'm really, we really gotta hope, guys, that this does not happen, because I mean that's a worst case scenario right there. I mean catastrophic. And then at the same time, this hurricane actually gets pulled in. It goes into Nova Scotia. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, this would if this actually happens, okay? Um, then this is going to be potentially the storm of the fall. Okay, this is good. This is I mean, this is something that's really going to be worth watching if this keeps up. So I'll probably get an update in for you guys tomorrow, but we really got to watch this because I mean, I know this is so far out, but I mean, what you just saw is really the worst case scenario of the fall here. And so, what could happen on the backside? Well, we see another major, what looks like a potentially another major winter storm setting up, but that doesn't do anything. It's starting to spin. Okay, you've got a lot of wind. Wow, look at this. This tight gradient here, very tight wind streams here. That's going to signify some strong winds, but really doesn't do much. And on the backside, you get another group of just wintry precipitation in general. So a lot of crazy and wild different scenarios coming up today, and we'll really have to watch each and every one of them pretty closely. But whatever's going to happen, it looks like it's going to be big. So taking a look at our current temperature anomalies. So we're kind of all over the place, really. Starting out where we are now, we see a few areas of warm, few areas of cold. Eastern U.S. is mainly cold, but here's that folded ridge out here in the southeast. All right, this used to be flattened out. Right here, you can see it's completely flattened out, really. Right there. All right, it's starting to get flattened out by that cold front, and it's just it's warm in the south, cold in the north. Okay, but then that quickly gets folded over to the southeast, and that's going to get pushed out to sea. All right, but then another big band of warm air starts to move down from Canada, which is kind of unusual to see this, but we're getting into El Niño here. This is actually going to tie into El Niño. We actually might end up seeing this kind of pattern as we get into El Nino, because usually what we see is a big boundary of warm air settle over the northern U.S. into Canada, and that could actually be that's going to be a player in what we could actually be dealing with as far as our pattern goes for our El Nino winter. But we go to when our storm system enters. Okay, this is the 17th. This is our cold front right here. Okay, not that impressive, not very cold. Okay, but really once it gets to the eastern U.S., that's when it really unleashes the freeze. Look at this. We're getting 6 to 8 degrees below our historical average, but nothing that impressive. So we really don't see much. We're 336 hours out. Nothing much really. Not a great reason to show this for any reason, but it shows a big cold blast in the west and then very very warm in the east. So another potentially just another very active pattern coming up. So what I just showed you is some wild scenarios that are coming up from the latest GFS model. But we look at our current 6 to 10 day temperature outlook based off of the Climate Prediction Center. We see above very very high above average in the central U.S. spreading out towards the central. I mean, the rest of the central, the eastern, and western U.S. and in the southwestern U.S. we see a tiny pocket of below average temperatures. So it looks like we could actually be dealing with a pretty big, just a pretty big area in general that's going to be under the gun for some above average temperatures. So I just want to quickly go over this. This is just taking a look, checking back into where we are with El Nino. So El Nino is the current climatological season that we are in that's going to continue into winter, which basically means that we're going to see warmer sea surface temperatures in the Pacific, and we're supposed to be cooler in the Atlantic, but the Atlantic is also pretty much equally as warm as the Pacific, so that's going to really stir some things up for our coastal storms, okay? But starting out here, just looking at how strong our El Nino is, so this was based off of sea surface temperatures that were estimated just a few hours ago. All right, we can see 30 degrees Celsius off the coast of Mexico. This is, I mean, we're getting into the 80s and approaching 90 degrees for sea surface temperature. So we're still very, very warm. We are certainly past the point where we're not supposed to be this warm during winter, but we see 26 ranging from around 25 to 28 degrees, 29 degrees Celsius of our sea surface temperatures. We're getting to the 80s. I wouldn't say we're approaching 90s if we're a little bit, we're a little bit cooler here, but we're definitely in the 80s here, and this is, this is going to be this is definitely a big reason of why everyone is saying that we're most likely going to be going from a moderate to strong El Nino. I think most people are now calling this a strong El Nino because if you look at the 12Z um, analysis here of the sea surface temperatures, these numbers are a little bit higher, and that really that shows you really how strong we actually are. So, this is just based off the 18Z, which is when we're getting a little. We're not quite. Actually, I guess because we're out west, this is actually when it would be the middle of the day. So really, yeah, these are your your sea surface temperatures, your high sea surface temperatures. But for the last part of the update, I just wanted to show you guys this. This is our Enzo model predictions here, and so Enzo is just kind of the type of El Nino that we're in. It's very hard to understand Enzo. And I haven't completely understood it yet, so I'm not going to take time to discuss and talk about what Enzo really means. This is basically what this means here. You don't want to overthink it, okay? This bar here just shows you how strong the El Nino can be. And so these are all the models spread out here on this chart. And the higher they go, the stronger the El Nino is, okay? And the line separating El Nino from La Nina is this line right here, 0, okay? And so these are our Caesar our Nino El Nino temperature anomalies here. Okay, all right, and so we start out. Okay, this was where we were in October. Okay, so in October we were pretty much 1.5 degrees above historical average. Okay, so that means that we're pretty much in a weak to moderate El Nino at that point. Okay, we take this to November. This is where we are right now. Okay, and so you can see that the models are really spreading out at this point here. Okay, but we'll go in the middle here. We'll stick in the middle. We're approaching 2 degrees above our historical average, so this is really in the middle here. This is where we're definitely at a moderate El Nino, but these numbers continue to go up, and so that's going to bring us into December. Okay, December. Some models actually take this to a decline. Okay, so this could actually, once we get into December, this could actually result in El Nino starting to take a decline, and then we approach our future La Nina. Okay, but there's a good chance that we're gonna stick with an El Nino for the rest of a winter into spring. But we see a lot of models up here really take this high, and some of these models go pretty crazy, and we get to a 2.59 degrees Celsius above our historical average. That is a strong El Nino right here. Okay, and that's really going. This is a very good graphic to look at if you really want to get the rich details of what could, your best guess possible of what could happen this winter. Okay, but we see, I would say the majority of these models take it in the middle. So it looks like what we could say that we will have a near a moderate. I would say moderate to strong El Nino. El Nino is what we could expect. I don't think we're gonna get above, 2.25 degrees Celsius here above our historical average. So I think really 2.25 degrees Celsius below is really where we could be talking about for our range. I think anything above that could be a little over the top here. but yeah, this spreadsheet will actually get tighter and tighter. So we can check back in this with this in about a month. And I think we'll have a little bit more of a clear understanding of what could happen as we get into winter. So that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for coming to watch. I'll see you guys in the next video. So, you know, I think that we're definitely going to be get. I think we're definitely going to be very active as we get later and later into November and then into closer and closer to winter. All right, I think we're going to see some pretty big snowstorms, some pretty big winter storms, and then we just gotta continue watching that signal for that big trough and big snow, that big storm system that the 12 and 18 ZGFS were showing. From the 15th to the 19th. Okay. But yeah, we'll just continue watching all this stuff. We'll continue watching El Nino, obviously. So, thank you all for coming to watch this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.